Shalom, welcome to Shari Tikva. My name is Rabbi Daniel Schweber. We're here to commemorate, to remember, and to really commit ourselves to making sure that something like this never happens again. And as we see in the news this week even, that the seeds of hate are still there. And it's our job, like a weed, to make sure to knock it out, to push it out. To begin our evening, I call upon the Honorable Robert Steves, the Mayor of the Village of Scarsdale, to say a word of greeting.
It is a distinct privilege to be part of this evening. It is good that we are all here. We gather this evening as a community respectful of each other's religious beliefs, proud of our respective ethnicities, and comfortable that we will not suffer for this. Comfortable. A mere 70 years or so after that very comfort we take for granted was shattered by the most horrific of human transgressions. Tonight, we gather as a community to remember and reflect. To remember the victims of this most mortal of sins, but also to reflect on what the Holocaust means to our life today. One need not be Jewish, as I am not, to grasp the significance of the Holocaust in the history of mankind. Where there is no doubt, there is a deeper pain and a darker sorrow that some of us may never know. There is indeed enough pain to bind us as a community to, as the rabbi said, to make sure that nothing like this happens again. We do not trivialize the Holocaust by applying its lessons to other events which test our very humanity and our courage in the face of evil. But rather, we substantiate its continued relevancy to our individual and collective efforts to improve the human condition. As a number of eyewitnesses ebb, and as life presents so many distractions, our prayers this evening should be for the will to maintain the memory of the Holocaust as relevant and fresh, that it should be etched in our consciousness and reverberate in our conscience. It is good that we are here. Welcome.
Thank you. And to also note in attendance tonight is Paul Feiner, the supervisor of the town of Greenberg. Amy Paulin is here, and I'm reading a letter from Senator Kirsten Gillibrand. Dear friends, it is a privilege to send greetings to everyone attending the 23rd Annual Communal Interfaith Holocaust Commemoration. I am grateful to Shari Tikva, the congregation, all its supporters for renewing their commitment to promoting human rights, diversity, and solving social injustice. As we recall the events of the Holocaust, it is important that we work to ensure that horrible events in our history are not repeated. It is my hope that your efforts inspire others to promote human rights, remember the past, and be of service to those in the community. Please accept my best wishes for a wonderful event and more years of continued success. Mary Marvin, the mayor of Bronxville, also sends her good wishes to us, and I want to point out that two survivors who have been here and been present for all 22 years before this are not able to be here this evening, and that is Jack and Ina Pollack. Jack is 101 years old, and Ina is 91 years old. They are of various ill health, but something to note about is that Jack and Ina are from Holland, and they have a beautiful story that is commemorated in steel pencil for me, a book, a documentary, and now thanks to Cantor Gerald Cohen, an opera as well, about their story of love and hope, even while enduring the Holocaust. Because they are from Holland, they have become very much involved in the Anne Frank Society, both in Amsterdam and here in New York. And yesterday in Washington, D.C., in the Capitol, was planted a sapling from the Anne Frank tree. if you read her diary, there was a chestnut tree in front of her house that she was able to see from her attic, and that kept her going. And she writes, "As long as that tree is alive, I have hope." The tree was damaged in 2009 and fell down in 2011, but they took chestnuts from that tree and made saplings, 11 of which are being planted here in the United States, one which was planted yesterday in the United States Capitol, and Ina and Jack's daughter, Marguerite, was able to be there for that. So we now rise for the sounding of the shofar.
As been our tradition over the many years that we've come together, we begin with a candle lighting ceremony. We have 3 Holocaust survivors here this evening, and each of them will be asked to light 2 candles, escorted by students from Eastchester High School who recently went on a trip to Poland and the concentration camps, and will help by noting their response to that trip by some of them sharing some reflections later in the service, but by escorting the survivors here this evening. I'd like to call first at this time Stefan Weinberg to stand at his seat for a moment, and to be joined by his side by Jonathan Goldman and Victoria Biancavilla. Ask them to come forward to light the first 2 candles. We kindle the first light in memory of the helpless infants and children who were cut down like young trees before their time. Together, may their memory be a blessing. We kindle the second light in memory of all the mothers and fathers, many of whom died with their children in their arms, wishing they could make the world a safer place for the future. Now we call upon Elsa Federbush to come forward to be escorted by Laura Brown and Diana Francisco. We kindle the third light in memory of all the rabbis, scholars, poets, and teachers who were taken in order to crush the spirits of the others. We kindle the fourth light in memory of the martyrs whose lives were given that other might live. And now we call upon Melvin Federbush to rise. Call upon Ryan Winnie. If there are any other students from the Eastchester High School who were on the trip, If I do not have your names, come forward also and escort Mr. Federbush. Yeah, coming.
Okay, thank you.
We kindle the fifth light in memory of the resistors, Jews and non-Jews who dedicated their lives to fighting the Nazi reign of terror. And we kindle the sixth candle in memory of all the other individuals who were so cruelly separated from their families, never to be seen again. In Hebrew we say Zichronam Levracha, may their memory be for a blessing. And let us say, Amen.
A reading from Exodus. But Moses said to God, "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt?" God said, "I will be with you." But Moses said to God, "If I come to the Israelites and say to them, 'The God of your ancestors has sent me to you,' and they ask me, 'What is his name?' what shall I say to them?" God said to Moses, "I am who I am." Then Moses answered, "But suppose they do not believe me or listen to me, but say, 'The Lord did not appear to you'?" The Lord said to him, "What is that in your hand?" He threw the staff to the ground, and it became a snake. But Moses said to the Lord, "O my Lord, I have never been eloquent, but I am slow of speech and slow of tongue." Then the Lord said to him, "Who gives speech to mortals?" But Moses said, "O my Lord, please send someone else." The Lord said, "Your brother Aaron will speak for you." Together we say, in the midst of adversity, one person makes a difference. From the book of Esther. When Mordecai learned all that had happened, Mordecai tore his clothes and put on sackcloth and ashes and went through the city, crying out loudly and bitterly. When Esther's maidens and eunuchs came and informed her, the queen was greatly agitated that Haman had promised to pay the king for the destruction of the Jews. Mordecai sent word to Esther to charge her to go to the king to make supplication to him and entreat him for her people. But Esther spoke, "All of the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces know that if any man or woman goes to the king inside the inner court without being summoned, they are put to death. Only if the king holds out the holy scepter to someone may that person live." Mordecai replied, "Do not think that in the king's palace you will escape more than other Jews. And who knows? Perhaps you've come to royalty for just such a time as this." Then Esther replied to Mordecai to gather all of the Jews and fast for 3 days. On the third day, Esther put on her royal robes and stood in the inner court of the king's palace, opposite the king's hall. As soon as the king saw Queen Esther standing in the court, she won his favor, and he held out to her the golden scepter that was in his hand. Together, in the midst of adversity, one person makes a difference.
A reading from the prophet Jeremiah. The word of the Lord came to me, saying, "Before I created you in the womb, I selected you. Before you were born, I consecrated you. I appointed you a prophet concerning the nations." I replied, "O Lord God, I do not know how to speak, for I am only a boy." But the Lord said to me, "Do not say I am still a boy, for you shall go wherever I send you and speak whatever I command you. Have no fear of them, for I am with you to deliver you, declares the Lord." Together we say, in the midst of adversity, one person makes a difference.
From the book of Jonah. Now the word of the Lord came to Jonah, son of Amittai, saying, "Go at once to Nineveh, the great city, and cry out against it, for their wickedness has come before me." But Jonah set out to flee to Tarshish from the presence of the Lord. But the Lord hurled a great wind upon the sea, and such a mighty storm. But the Lord provided a large fish to swallow up Jonah, and Jonah was in the belly of the fish 3 days and 3 nights. Jonah prayed to the Lord, and the Lord spoke to the fish, and it spewed Jonah out upon dry land. The word of the Lord came to Jonah a second time, saying, "Get up, go to Nineveh, that great city, and proclaim to it the message that I tell you." So Jonah went out to Nineveh, and the people of Nineveh believed in God, They proclaimed a great fast, and everyone, great and small, put on sackcloth. When God saw what they did, how they turned from their evil ways, God changed his mind about the calamity that he had said that he would bring upon them, and he did not do it. We respond together. In the midst of adversity, one person makes a difference. We spend many times thinking about how do we teach about the Holocaust. Whenever I do so, usually to young adults, they first can't fathom it. Did this really happen? How could it happen? And when we read accounts of people who lived through the Holocaust, who were killed in the Holocaust, who were told that there were rumors about what was going on, people said, no, that can't be. How is it possible? So one of the ways that we have said that we can do so to teach them is to have them be witness, to go back to the places where the killings happened, where the atrocities happened, so they could get a little bit of a glimmer of what exactly happened, and know that even though it is unfathomable, the unfathomable did happen. A series of students from Eastchester High School did just that this past February, and two students, Jonathan Goldman and Victoria Biancavilla, will share the reflections of their trip.
I would like to let you all know that several of my classmates and I went on a Holocaust remembrance tour this past February where we visited major landmarks and places associated with the Holocaust. We traveled throughout Germany, Poland, the Czech Republic, and Austria, spending hours on a bus every day in order to gain insight on the tragedy that was the Holocaust. Now I would like to clear up a misconception about the Holocaust. The people in the countries affected by this plague did know what was going on inside of the camps. Even though it's easier to stomach that the people didn't know, they did. At Mauthausen, there was a village on top of a hill looking down at the camp and quarry where people very easily could see the things such as harsh physical labor, prisoners being thrown off cliffs to fall hundreds of feet because it was fun for the guards to watch, and the completely malnourished prisoners who were little more than walking corpses, and the worst thing of all, they could smell the burning dead bodies from the crematorium. To make matters worse, for the entire time Mauthausen was operational, only one person called to complain about what was happening. This person called to complain about the prisoners were too loud and that they needed to be silenced. This is just one monstrosity from a camp that isn't even as well known as its counterpart, Auschwitz. Auschwitz is a monster that I cannot even begin to describe. The magnitude of Auschwitz I and Auschwitz II Birkenau is incomprehensible without being there firsthand. I'm going to focus on Auschwitz II Birkenau because that was the true killing center and is the most recognizable and infamous landmark of the Holocaust. This is the place where over 1 million people were murdered mercilessly, especially women and children. The hardest part about being there is taking a walk 1 million people took before you to their death. At the crossroad where the train stopped to drop off its unfortunate passengers, a decision was made of life and death. Men to the right, women, children, and elderly to the left. Anyone who went to the left was walking towards their death, right to the gas chambers and crematorium with no chance of survival. The hard part, as you may imagine, was not walking down the same path that they took to see what is now a destroyed crematorium with only remnants of it surviving, but the walk back. Walking back, you realize that over 1 million people never got to make that same walk. On the walk back, as I slumped along with tears in my eyes, I kept imagining the massive amount of people walking by me about 75 years ago, walking unknowingly to their death. I was constantly imagining seeing the faces of women trying to comfort their crying babies, children running around and playing, both of them oblivious to the fact that they would be dead within the hour. Seeing all the faces of the people that I thought were walking by, I could almost swear I saw 1 million different faces on that walk back. Every last single one of them is gone. That is the hardest part. Walking down a path that no person has ever walked before and seeing all the faces of a lost generation. What makes all of this even more disturbing is that the people who are similar to outside contractors who were brought into work on the camp never alerted anybody. What's even more disturbing than that is that the major Allied leaders such as FDR and Winston Churchill knew exactly what was going on previous to 1939, yet they did nothing about this because it wasn't crucial to the war effort. It was at this point I realized the potential of a phenomenon that is known as the ripple effect. What is the ripple effect? As I sat at the bottom of the base of the cliff at Mauthausen concentration camp and stared distantly at the cold, dark, still lake that was just a few feet in front of me, I learned what the ripple effect was. I picked up a small, tiny, insignificant pebble that was next to my boot and threw it up and high into the lake. When the pebble got swallowed by the water, ripples spread out from where the pebble had disappeared into, and the ripples did not stop until the entire lake was covered in ripples. This tiny, insignificant pebble had taken the then precariously still, immense lake and put small ripples everywhere throughout it. Not one part of that lake went unaffected by that pebble. Not one molecule of water went unmoved. If an insignificant pebble the size of a penny could cause all of this change in the lake, just think of how much of a difference just one word or one action can make on the world. The ripple effect is the little thing that you do every day that you think went unnoticed, when in reality the whole world is changed by that one small action. Just think about how the actions of a few could have saved the lives of many.
No books or documentaries can amount to the feeling of stepping foot onto a concentration camp. The ugly truth is suddenly, unavoidably, right before your eyes. This bitter revelation of the horrors of mankind was overwhelmingly real to me as I traveled through ghettos, camps, and prisons in which millions of innocent people suffered and perished. Initially, anger encompassed my entire being. I was infuriated by the power of hate. I could not rationalize, I could not justify, I could not understand what happened in the Holocaust. All too often, as it was for me for many years, the Holocaust is conceived to be a distant and intangible moment in history. Yet, the very hate that we see in the prejudice and judgment tremendously prevalent in our modern day society is the same hate that culminated into the mass killing of 11 million people in the Holocaust. The power of hate is frightening, but not impossible to overcome. My anger only lessened when I came to the realization that we as human beings have the ability to surmount hate. We have the duty to remember the plagues of the past, to acknowledge the problems of today, and to act for the future. The absolute horrors of the Holocaust must never be forgotten. The lives lost must be honored and preserved. We then must stop to examine the world in which we live, determining where hate resides. And most importantly, we must take the huge breadth of emotion this introspection creates and transform it into the will to change. On my personal journey through this process, I came to realize how prevalent hatred was in so many aspects of my life, and I was encouraged to stand up and stand against. Inspired by my peers who traveled with me, no longer can I witness or overhear hateful acts or remarks and not feel the will to stop it. Together, we realize the great ability we have to not only stop the hate we see around us, but to be a positive force as well. We came to see that every person has a unique story, and we mustn't judge, mock, or ostracize anyone for their differences, for that only fuels the fire. By immersing myself into the learning of the terrifying events of the Holocaust, I have felt great pain, but moreover, have been pushed to change. This experience did not just elicit feelings of sorrow, but also unveiled the horrid power of hate as the root of many evils. Evils that could be avoided if we, the human race, could stop hating. We must continue to learn of the Holocaust, remembering all those innocent lives lost, many never having the chance to reach full potential, while striving to avoid anything similar ever happening again. To do so, we must bring an end to prejudice and judgment, and instead embrace diversity, appreciate our differences, and love what makes us human.
Notice at the back of your program is a picture inspired Jonathan's ripple effect idea. And in the hallway, there's some more photos arranged by Sylvia Vigliani that the students took of their experience. Tonight's collection will be split in half between the Westchester Holocaust and Human Rights Education Center, whose mission is to promote Holocaust education with the goal of preventing future genocide, and as well as the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, whose mission is to ensure the political, educational, social, and economic equality of rights of all persons and to eliminate race-based discrimination. My fault. Keynote speech. My fault. I apologize. We'll pass the collection around and then we'll sing that. Tonight's keynote speaker is Judith Johnson, the interim superintendent of schools at Mount Vernon. She titled tonight, Atrocity and How We React to It.
Good evening. I've been given a very humbling task, that of mixing the glue that binds the continuing history of bigotry and hatred across the planet, and to do that by defining a context for healing. So in the next few minutes, I'm going to ask you to travel with me over much of my lifetime. The life stories of the Holocaust survivors remind us of the constant need to be vigilant and to be prepared to confront hatred and bigotry whenever and wherever it surfaces. Crimes against humanity continue to be executed each day in some corner of our planet. So the theme of my brief remarks intends to encourage us to view hateful attitudes, atrocities, and behaviors through the lens of history, so we can gain a greater understanding of the impact of centuries of oppression in all its iterations. And we understand we need to recognize we can never abandon the need to be outraged. So let's start at my beginning. It is the fall of 1955. Back from a summer of riding a colored-only section of the Chesapeake Bay Ferry, I enter high school and meet my English teacher, Mrs. Gold. Follow me as Mrs. Gold takes us on our first field trip. She boarded us on a yellow school bus for a trip to a place called Broadway to see a play that interpreted a book that we were reading. I may have lived in Brooklyn, but Broadway was as far away as California. The book was a diary of Anne Frank. At first, as a 12-year-old student beginning to experience womanhood, I focused on Anne's daily life. But quickly I realized she was hiding to save her life, and that condition overshadowed all else. I've probably been to Broadway 100 times since then, but I still remember the ending of that play and the profound effect it had on my life choices for the next 20 plus years. For those of you who know the play and the book, the final scene ends with Anne sitting in the attic as the footsteps of the stormtroopers enveloped the theater. I can still hear those stomps today. Just as I can still see the hoses and the dogs that are simulations of the stomps, and those were repeated during the 60s by those who would attempt to destroy my rights to drink from a water fountain of my choice. The diary is relevant, for it reminds us what can happen in this world if ethnic, racial, religious, and other forms of discrimination and hatred, instances of which occur daily around the world, are allowed to go unchecked. So Anne was my first intimate introduction to the Holocaust. At the same time, the battles for the civil rights were beginning to reach national news, and I, as a poor black kid admitted by oversight and mistake into a class of white kids who tested gifted, found myself viewed as a curiosity. You see, some scheduler had used my test scores to assign me to the class, but forgot to check my ethnicity. They explained this conundrum to my mother, and they decided to let me stay, assuming, I think, that I would quickly fail. After all, Brown versus Topeka Board of Education was making headlines. Mrs. Gold, this wonderful English teacher, was not going to let that happen. Fast forward 20 years later, in the intervening years adorned with afro and leather boots, I marched and picketed and chose to pursue a career that would focus on serving as the drum major for social justice. I moved to Rockland County, and there I met Georgine Hyde. Georgine Hyde is a Holocaust survivor. Georgine was president of the East Ramapo School Board 10 times. She served on the East Ramapo Board 36 years. She was twice president of the New York State School Boards Association. Georgine, a Holocaust survivor, is alive and lives in Pomona today. A gracious, smart, inclusive survivor, she told thousands of children her story of survival. But what one remembers most, and Georgine loved the concert, she would have really loved being here tonight. She's about 94. What one really remembers about Georgine was her commitment to ensuring that all children emerge safely out of childhood, prepared for life's challenges. Georgine and I shared laughs and tears. I was the pesty mother, pesting the Board of Education president. When I walked into the boardroom, she knew this was not going to be a quiet session. But she led the most successful, culturally diverse school district in New York State, and I would boast in the 70s, probably in the country. That's Georgine's story. Now let's fast forward once more. It is February 27th, 2014. 59 years after the production of the Diary of Anne Frank. Now to the most recent incidents of hatred, the Mount Vernon Mahopac basketball game. So the challenge I know that Rabbi Barzilai gave to me was to try to make a connection between the meanings and goals of the Holocaust, the memorial services, and today's world. Allow me to try. Breaking the cycle and claiming our humanity will require much work and effort from all of us, and it was very reassuring to listen to the young people as they talked about their reflections on their trips to the camps. When the statue honoring James Meredith, Ole Miss's first black student, was hatefully vandalized last fall, many New Yorkers probably assigned it to a place in their soul's geography called Mississippi and went about their business. Yet, students from Mount Vernon City School District, just up the road, my GPS tells me we are 5 miles apart. They and their families and spectators at a playoff basketball game on Thursday, February 27th at the Westchester County Center on White Plains learned quickly that racism doesn't respect geography and is very much with us in the beauty of the Hudson Valley and the relative sophistication and influence of Westchester County. Generally experienced stereotypes that we as a society continue to allow to infect the minds and hearts of young people scary. At that time, Confederate flags were unfurled in the arena, and students went on Twitter to intimidate and harass our students. Mount Vernon students now join a long list of valiant resistors like James Meredith. Right now, they're being called upon to stand up for justice, dignity, and equal treatment. They must do this while, like the young James Meredith, not accepting the status quo of society's malignant characterization of them as young men of color, nor society's persistent and perplexing tolerance of racism in the 21st century. Wherever men and women are persecuted because of their race, religion, or political views, that place must, at that moment, become the center of the universe. Our young people see through the hypocrisy of calling events like this incidents as though they were either rare or incidental. They know that racism is a deep wound that will continue to divide and weaken not only our nation but our planet, until and unless we have the courage to reject it absolutely. Our schools, our faith-based institutions, our communities need to work to reject and dismantle racism. And the first step in doing this is to acknowledge racism. And the second step is to join hands across our communities to overcome it. So try to find a way in which to capture through writing the comparisons where they were appropriate. And sometimes they are, and sometimes they aren't. So at first I went to two writers, Dr. King and Elie Wiesel. I went to Dr. King for comments that could connect the atrocities of slavery and the Holocaust and the continuing aftershocks, and quickly retrieved this statement: all life is interrelated. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. And then I went to Mr. Wiesel, who said, I swore never to be silent whenever and wherever human beings endure suffering and humiliation. We must always take sides. Neutrality helps the oppressor, never the victim. Silence encourages the tormentor, never the tormented. And then I looked to the poetry. Are there parallels in our poetry? The poet, Isaac Bashevis Singer, continues to search for eternal truths and for the essence of being in his poetry. In his own fashion, he tries to solve the riddle of time and change. He tries to find an answer to suffering. He tries to reveal love in the very abyss of cruelty and injustice. And so I offer you two poems that capture his thinking. First from Maya Angelou, And Still I Rise. It's a wonderfully defiant, human, uplifting cry from the deep heart of America, which tells a story that I'm sure speaks to us all. I'm only going to give you excerpts from the poem. You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt. You may shoot me with your words. You may cut me with your eyes. You may kill me with your hatefulness, but still, like air, I rise. Out of the huts of history's shame, I rise. Up from a past that's rooted in pain, I rise. This idea, coupled with the soulful rhythm, creates an atmosphere of unstoppable defiance. And then I went to the Holocaust Memorial Day Trust to find a comparable poem. And I found a poem by Gwyneth Lewis, The Fight for Justice. The fight for justice starts and ends with me. Truth is the sound of what I may say. I can only be well when others are free. And right has a price that I'm prepared to pay. I refuse to be afraid of force or hatred. I will pull their lies like weeds and plant gardens of more generous seeds. If I turn my back and walk away, who'll ask for others what I want for me? I can only be well when others are free. And right has a price I'm prepared to pay. We face in this country the task of rebuilding a sense of community, one defined by hope, civility, caring, and safety for all those who choose to call America home. All those who choose to call America home. Their spirits, fragile and in formation as Americans, need to embrace hope and a sense of security. They need a belief in America's fairness and in their ability to dream about and work towards a future that is not characterized by a loss of spirit, ethnic atrocities, bigotry, or racism. So the journey to eradicate hate, the journey to eradicate atrocities continues and is defined by each one of us in this room. Thank you.
Please rise for the memorial prayer.
Let's read together. God, full of compassion, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect peace in your sheltering presence to the souls of all the men, women, and children of the Jewish people, and of the righteous Gentiles, and of the millions of others who died during the Holocaust, defending the right to be different. Master of mercy, let them find refuge forever in the shadow of your wings, and let their souls be bound up in the bond of eternal life. May their memory endure, may it inspire truth and loyalty in our lives, in our religious community and tasks. May their memory be a blessing and a sign of peace for all humanity. May they rest in peace, and let us say, Amen.
You may be seated. As Ms. Johnson said, quoting Dr. King, we are all touched by all that happens in the world. I mentioned earlier Jack Pollock, who is a member of this congregation, and how he was able to attend almost all of the previous services. And what he cherished most was talking, especially to students, but talking to all of us and giving us a charge. And he put it down to 6 things. Don't discriminate. Don't generalize. Don't be a bystander. Work for peace. Enjoy the simple things in life. We are living here in a wonderful country. We all need to work together to make this a better world. But this can only be achieved if people learn the lessons of atrocities like the Holocaust. We all have an obligation, but we appreciate how those who survived the Holocaust have taken on, not of their choice, a greater obligation to share their stories while they are alive. But we are all mortal, even those who survived the Holocaust, and there are fewer and fewer survivors around today. So there is a new group of people who have that obligation a little bit stronger than we all do. Again, not of their own choice. And those are the descendants of Holocaust survivors. So for this lighting of this candle of hope and peace, we take a seventh candle. The sixth was chosen to represent the 6 million, but in Judaism, 7 represents completeness, like the 7 days of the week, and on the seventh day, the Sabbath day, is the holiest. So we light this candle of hope and peace to complete and show our yearning to make a complete and healed world. So for this, I call the descendants of survivors to come forward and to bear witness to the Holocaust. Thank you so much for bringing us hope and hopefully bringing us peace and taking on your obligation seriously. Thank you. I want to thank you all for coming this evening, especially the students of Eastchester High School and Bronxville High School, for sharing your thoughts, sharing your talents, and again, bearing witness. After the service, everyone is welcome into the other room to share some refreshments, but really to share in each other's friendship and collegiality, to show that we really are united as one. In Judaism, really probably in all religions, the idea of blessing is something that is central. And Judaism takes the idea of blessing not just always in good things, but saying that we can find a blessing in all that we do. And even in the darkest of hours, there is little tears of light. And we know the stories of the righteous Gentiles, we know the stories of the survivors, that they did find those little glimmers of light. So we'll conclude with a benediction, the priestly benediction, one of the most ancient blessings in the Bible that causes us to think about being together and, of course, a yearning for peace. May the Lord bless you and guard you. May the Lord shine favor upon you and be gracious to you.
Shalom.
Lord show you kindness and grant you peace. And let us all say, Amen. We conclude with a partisan song.
It's here in English, but we'll be singing it in its original Yiddish. And anyone certainly who knows the Yiddish, please.
And Stefan says we should rise for it.
So mit Heimat, du gehst den letzten Weg, vor Himmel Reihen verstellen neue Tag. Kommen wird noch unser ausgewählte Show, Svetter beugt uns zertraut mir seinen Do. Kommen wird noch unser ausgewählte Show, Svetter beugt uns zertraut mir seinen Do. Von grünem Palmenland bis weißem Land von Schnee, wir kommen all mit unser Pein, mit unser Weh. Und wo wir fallen, ist spritzt von unser Blut. Sprossen wird dort unser Gura, unser Mut. Und wo wir fallen, ist spritzt von unser Blut. Sprossen wird dort unser Gura, unser Mut. Wird die Morgensonne gilden uns im Hain, unser Nächtenwein verschwinden mit dem Feind. Nur euch versammeln wird die Sonne und der Kajor, wie Aparol, so geht das Lied von Dor zu Dor. Nur euch versammeln wird die Sonne und der Kajor, wie Aparol, so geht das Lied von Dor zu Dor. Not blood, but blood inscribed this song we sing. It's not a caroling of birds upon the wing, but 'twas the people midst the crashing fires of hell that sang this song and fought courageous till it fell. But 'twas the people midst the crashing fires of hell that sang this song and fought courageous till it fell. So mit Heimat, du gehst den letzten Weg, Gott Himmel bleiben verstellen neue Tag. Kommen wird noch unser ausgedenkte Show, Svetter beugt und unser Traum wir seinen Do. Kommen wird noch unser ausgedenkte Show, Svetter beugt und unser Traum wir seinen Do.
Thank you very much.